So hi everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today I do have a very special guest. Since April 2019, Phillip Dunlap, who was born in Iowa, in Mason City, is the director of the Broward County Cultural Division, a local art agency that manages the county's investments in the art through grants making, public art initiative, and art education. So, Phillip, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. It's Thursday, so it's almost the weekend.
It's almost the weekend. Woohoo! So, well, you are part of the Broward County Cultural Center, and this is a big title, a big responsibility that you have in your office, managing all these projects that are going through the Broward County. So how did you end up here in Broward County in sunny Florida? Is that because of the sun?
Well, it's interesting. I never thought ever of moving to Florida. Florida was never on my radar, and that's not because I didn't like Florida. But then actually thinking about it, I'd never really visited here either.
Okay.
But I spent, I guess, the part of my career prior to moving here, I've always been in the arts. I studied music in college. I studied jazz piano. I've been involved in the arts, I guess, since probably fifth grade. No, actually, I started taking piano lessons in second or third grade.
Ooh, that's young.
And then was in choir and jazz band, and I was in theater in high school, and I went to different summer camps and arts camps, and arts were kind of the only thing I was good at, that and sort of politics or those
politics
kinds of things.
For sure.
And so when it came time to make a decision for college, I went to a school near St. Louis, Missouri. I studied music, graduated with my master's, and it was in my master's degree I figured out there was this thing called arts administration, and I didn't want to. I felt I had more to offer the arts beyond being a practicing artist, and quite frankly, that was sort of an uncomfortable space for me, just in the sense of maybe staking my entire. Putting all my eggs in one basket.
Okay.
And the great thing about artists, and it's not just musicians, but all artists, is we're very entrepreneurial.
Yes, you are.
The Future of Music Coalition did a study at one point and kind of identified over 60 different income streams that musicians could use to make money. And I bring that up because while I was in, I discovered arts administration. It gave me the option or the stability of working within the arts community for an arts nonprofit, having a full-time job with a salary, but then also being able to do other things, to help sort of supplement income and those kinds of things. So I worked for a dozen years for an arts nonprofit as director of education. I created education and community programs all around teaching people about jazz music. So it was for high school kids. It was teaching them how to play and to be better musicians and learning jazz as a practitioner. For adults, we had a jazz book club, and we had different performances. We called them like lecture concert series. We called it Jazz Speaks, which would have a concert and a lecture before, and the concert and the lecture were were interrelated. So, and I've always been a teacher at heart. So in St. Louis, I had my nonprofit job, and then like I mentioned, the entrepreneurial side, I was teaching adjunct at some universities. I was a gigging musician, so I was in a wedding band. I was playing little clubs and parties and things like that. And I started doing some work for the State Department, going to different countries, and they call it cultural diplomacy, where you do community concerts and workshops. And I was in Afghanistan, I was in Guyana, I was in Thailand a number of times.
Wow.
St. Croix, the Virgin Islands. And then I started getting into the public side of things. And I became president of Missouri Citizens for the Arts, which was the statewide arts advocacy organization, because just like you have the practitioners of the arts and you have the arts organizations and the artists, you also have the advocacy piece to make sure that your legislators know that the arts are important.
Yes, it is.
And looking at how my career developed and what was next for me, I started looking for an opportunity to be on that public side, to be part of a government entity. I really thought about public policy and thought about what are the systemic levers and strategies that actually make the environment, so to speak, favorable for the growth and development of arts and culture, steering of resources, both financial and otherwise. And I happened to find this job in Broward County. And as I said, I never thought about Florida. When I was looking for jobs, it was not on my short list of places. But this is where the job was, and I applied for it, and I got the job, and then I moved here.
All right.
Yeah, so it's almost 6 years.
Almost 6 years now, and doing some big, big things here in Broward County. Because there's so much to do here. There's so many talented artists in the art community as a musician, as so many different aspects of the art community, like you mentioned. Of course, the podcast is more about the street art, the public art now, as we call it. This used to be just street art, now it's public art as soon as it's kind of commissioned.
Yeah.
Yes, well.
It's sort of an institutional evolution of sorts. But, our looking at public art specifically, our public art program has been around almost 50 years. And it really was one of the first, or among the first in the country. So in 1976, the Public Art Ordinance was created, the Public Art and Design Committee was created, and then out of that, some years later, we're not exactly sure when, then the Cultural Division was created, or it was a Council of Cultural Affairs. It sort of evolved from there. But you see that sort of evolution from street art to sort of institutionalized, like even with jazz music, which I studied, right? You have a music that was born in, out of oppression and out of some really dire circumstances, and then now you can study it at the university and you can get a degree in it, right? So it's sort of an evolution of the arts of sorts.
Yeah, so talking about public art, you and your team and Muda was the artist who got selected just to finish a huge project, a huge mural here. It was somehow a controversial mural in downtown, right on Broward Boulevard. And I'm very happy that Muda, who I've known for over 10 years, I really saw him growing as a young man, as an artist. I was very happy. He was actually on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, a month ago. So talking about this project. So this was a big project for the community, for the respect of the community, which is usually something whenever the artists are going into different communities, they really try to make an impact and then to give back to that community. So this mural was a big project.
It was a big project, and we had at the division we had a desire for many years to redo this mural, and with the help of Maxence finally got the okay to do it, and with additional support from the Downtown Development Authority and Jenny Morillon and her team. But that it's interesting. You can go back and look at the origin of that mural, and it's the artist was put in a difficult situation, and that mural was actually commissioned by, I believe, the county manager at the time, bypassed the public art process, and as you alluded to, art, especially when it's seeking to tell the story of a community, can be very controversial if it's not approached in the right way.
Correct.
Because what gets visualized, what gets put on the mural, we always talk about gatekeeping in the arts and whose stories and whose narratives are we telling and from what perspectives, and what we ended up, with that old mural was a very one-sided and I'd say sort of whitewashed version of the history of Broward.
Right, it's just a sign of the time.
And so this was I guess maybe the late 80s when that mural was done, or early 90s, and then they kind of realized that for example, there were no people of color in that mural, and they went, the artist went back in 2002, I think, and added Dr. Sistrunk, sort of in a token way, kind of up in the clouds. And but then that mural was there for all told for 40 years or so, right? And So part of this is getting the community, the government, everybody to just one to understand that, murals are great. We've got to be really careful when we think about public art and murals in this case, about what stories are being told, what narratives are being elevated, what we're celebrating from what perspectives, and we also have to recognize, I think, that murals shouldn't be permanent. Right?
No, that shouldn't be.
And so this idea that public art can also be ephemeral, or that permanent maybe doesn't actually mean like permanent for like a million years kind of permanent, but 15 years, 10 years, 5 years. And so it was great to work with Muta and with 26 North and getting this mural done.
Yes.
We've had great feedback. If you've seen it, you'll notice that there are no human figures. It's all flora and fauna that is representative of this community. And that's something that the community can get behind. And we're not being polarizing by saying who gets to choose that this person was represented,
Correct.
Not this person, or this story was told and not
Correct,
this story. There's a place for that type of mural and art, and it has to be approached, I think, in a very careful and full of care process. And we're really pleased with how it turned out.
30 years ago, I was working in downtown, and I would drive by this wall every single day. I didn't know much about the story of Broward County, but like we say, it's a sign of the time. But it's very important to bring the art into those communities, and this is with your team what you are usually encouraging through grants, which is a very important aspect of your work.
Yeah, one of our main lines of business, so to speak, if you want, our strategies is our grant programs, which are for arts organizations, but also for individual artists. And in addition to the grants, which fund projects, which I think is I benefited from a grant when I was back in St. Louis. I applied to sort of an organization very similar to the Cultural Division to do some concerts and some recording projects. And if I didn't have that money, I would not have been able to self-finance it.
It just wouldn't understand it. Yeah.
So we can play a role in helping to provide that support for arts organizations and artists to have access to funds, to capital to fund projects and really help them be creative. And then we also on sort of the back end we deal with where we provide a lot of opportunities for them to learn, and we call it capacity building, and build their capacity.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, a nonprofit is a business. We always say that nonprofit is a tax designation. It's not a business plan, right? And same with artists. Artists are entrepreneurs, as we talked about, and so we want artists to be the best business people. That we want arts organizations to be the best businesses that they are, or that they can be, and so we have to think about how we care for both of those. It's not only the incentive funding through grants to produce the product, but also the learning opportunities to be more effective at what they do, right?
Yeah, so this is something that you provide on the website, on the broward.org, about the public art design, the grants and funding, the call to artists, the opportunities in art, and all those different aspects of the art community outreach for the artists. So really, really big project. You... for the past, 3 years, you've been also doing the Ignite Broward. So now you...
Well, it'll be our fifth year coming up in 2026.
See,
I
skip a year or two.
Yeah. And so art and tech is a focus of ours. And I think technology well, I don't think, I know, we all know technology is becoming an increasingly important part of our lives. And that means that the intersection of technology and art is going to become more and more important. Doesn't mean that we don't also care for and think about traditional art forms, but we've got to think about how we're working with artists to better leverage technology to help them expand their practice as a tool or as a medium of art in and of itself. So we're really pleased and happy with how Ignite has evolved. In 2025, we had over 80,000 people over the 10-day festival that attended.
It was quite something.
And we are in 3 locations, Hollywood, Dania Beach, and downtown Fort Lauderdale. So it's expanded. The community seems to have really embraced it, and we're excited to see where that goes in the future.
Yeah, it's something that we also mentioned, the impact, the social impact and the economic impact of the art. I was reading something about the Broward County. The arts contribute to $386 million annually and employ nearly 7,000 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's incredible to see this.
Yeah, I think, we often think about with arts, we focus on the product, the end result. It's the mural that's produced, it's the opera that you're seeing, it's the art exhibition, it's the concert that you go to. But there's a whole heck of a lot of work that goes into making sure that performance can happen, right? And, you're talking about, opera, for example, which is one of the most expensive forms of art.
Yes.
You've got to rent venues, you've got costumes, you've got musicians, you got to pay for the rights to music, you've got all the rehearsals to pay for, and all the money from ticket sales come in at the very end, right? And
at the very end, yes.
And so these arts businesses, these arts organizations are putting a lot of money into the economy. They're employing people, and they're not just employing artists on stage. It's security people. It's people that run performing arts centers. There's an economic impact, and in fact, it's for every dollar invested in the arts here in Broward County, there's a $9 return. And so there's a demonstrated economic impact. And when we start thinking about the arts as sort of a micro economy within the larger economy, you see it as an industry and one that has that impact. That yes, the product it creates is something that connects with our soul, that we that we love and appreciate, but it is no less important than the tourism industry. And in fact, it connects with the tourism industry or the service industry or the construction industry or the aviation industry. These are all microeconomies that make up the entire Broward County economy, and it's just as legitimate.
Yes, it is. It is. And even from the people who are designing the posters and all the websites, because everything, the social media, and like you say, I mean, there's so many people involved. It takes a village.
Right.
It definitely takes a village for one show or one representation of the Lion King or whatever. And there's so many people on stage. And so,
but even, let's take the Lion King, for example. That's there's also a difference, and I think people need to understand, the Lion King is a great show. When you go to, say, the Broward Center to see the Lion King, that's a traveling show.
It is.
And the artists and musicians, they don't live here.
No,
and
they don't.
I don't say that as a negative thing, but if you buy a ticket to one of our local theater companies, all the artists, the musicians, the actors, the sound technicians, the stagehands, the stage manager, the people that manage the theater, they're all local. So your dollar, when you say buy a ticket to Slow Burn Theater's production of Something Rotten, is going to reverberate through the economy in a much different way. So I think we also have to be conscious of how we consume the arts.
Yes.
I suppose it's the difference of only watching Marvel movies and making sure that we're also patronizing independent films at the same time.
Correct.
Because they're just as impactful, but maybe they don't have millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars behind it.
Yes.
But your dollar is actually doing a lot.
It does.
A lot. It's penetrating a lot deeper into the market than...
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And then we also have all the tourism, the people who are visiting all these museums, the galleries and everything, that art really brings also tourism. It's also part of the culture in Broward, whenever you go to Paris, to the Louvre.
But I think we have a long way to go in this community with understanding that if we really invest in the arts, we can really maximize its impact on tourism, right? Here tourism very often is the beach, and it's the hotels on the beach, and it's the restaurants, and it's sort of a chicken and the egg, where there's the thought like, the arts, people don't come here for the arts, and maybe that's true. Maybe when they're here, maybe they'll check out some art activations.
But
I think if we really invest in elevating our arts organizations, our arts ecosystem, it can have a significant impact on tourism, which is one of our, if not our biggest generator of economic activity here in Broward County. It's tourism, and the things we know about cultural tourists, as opposed in comparison to leisure tourists, is cultural tourists travel more often and they spend more money.
They do,
and so if we're only focusing here on the leisure market, we're missing a huge segment of tourism that could really generate a significant economic impact. And so the arts community here is great, but there's a feeling that it's for locals and it's not for tourists. And we have to start changing. And we have to start changing that. We have to start changing that narrative. And I think we're in the process of doing that. Things like Ignite, things like the Avenue of the Arts Festival, these are great pieces for us to invest in to continue to promote and elevate arts and culture into that space. But then we have to start showing the intersections with tourism, and we have to start promoting these events and these opportunities to the tourists, or we have to be promoting those things outside of Broward County to attract people to come here to enjoy the beaches, enjoy the weather, but we're deeper than that as a community. The sun and the sand and the waves, but it's also our stories, it's our cultures, it's the diversity of everybody that's here and that cultural product that they create and bring to the table that I think also is really attractive to people if we just believed that we had something worth sharing. And I think that's where we have to get to. I can see that, yes. So how about maybe an art fair, like they have during Art Basel in Miami in December, bringing something? Sure, but I think there are a lot of local artists that are able to sort of plug into that. But don't forget that Art Basel, and this is no shade to Art Basel, but those are, that's like blue chip art that comes in.
Yes, it is.
And so we have to get beyond a very transactional approach to arts and culture, and we have to celebrate and invest in what's here. And I was just having a conversation with someone. It's like, we have to build an ecosystem, and building that ecosystem is like growing a garden. Right?
I can see that.
The ground is there. Everything needed to grow is in the ground. And our job in order to grow that ecosystem is to make sure there's enough sunlight, there's enough water, there's enough nutrients, and what is meant to grow will grow. And we know that when we put invasive species or we put things that are not meant to be there, they grow and they take over.
They do take over.
And they kill off what's meant to grow, those sort of natural flora, and plant life that's there. So I look at growing our ecosystem like growing a garden or a prairie in Iowa, where I came from.
I like that, yeah.
Right? Everything that we need is there. And everything that we need is here, right? Creativity and talent is equally distributed, but access is not, right? And so it is not, right? And so our goal is to stay out of the way, to provide the fertilizer, grant monies and access to resources and the education to be more impactful, to provide enough sunlight and water so that the creativity and the cultural elements that are here can grow naturally. And then we can say to everybody, look what we have. That's a product of us. Not something we brought in from the outside and said, look what we built, or look what we purchased from the outside, right? It's a product of us. And I think that's the difference, whether it's Art Basel or some other big art festival or fair. A lot of times those end up shutting out local artists, and you bring in artists from the outside. And it's great. It may show a spotlight here, but there are a lot of artists in Miami that feel they don't benefit from Art Basel because it creates a narrative and a picture of art in Miami that is a manufactured identity and not indicative of what actually is there.
It is, but it still brings a lot of work to many local people.
But what happens when that goes away? So our strategy then I think has to be in creating this ecosystem has to be a mixture of things, right? And
absolutely.
I'm starting to think about how do we make sure that arts and culture is accounted for and represented in our urban planning processes and in our land use plans and in our development incentives. Because if we can, I can throw all the money I have at events and sponsoring events and things, and if something happens to that money, then the events go away. But if I can get cities and the county and our planning organizations to think about how we deeply root arts and culture into the literal fabric of the community, then you create, I think, a much more resilient and sustainable arts ecosystem. It's that environment that allows that garden to grow. Right.
Yes.
And not something that is kind of surface level that still has a benefit, but when that money dries up, then everything you built goes away because the money went. So,
once again, talking about money, funding, and everything. Yes,
money talks, right?
Money talks, and then we know the rest of the.
It's a dynamic and just very nuanced, I think. Not problem, but issue to think about how you grow this ecosystem, and it's not just money, it's not just one thing, or it's not this as opposed to that. It's we really have to think about it as an ecosystem,
and keeping the identity of the city, of the town, of all those different little pockets. When we have some art, we were talking about Mass District and all those districts that are Fat Village, and now we have the new art district with Thrive. Recently, this past 2 weeks, they finally did some more murals, so hopefully this is a little community, another little neighborhood that's going to be growing and finding its own identity. That's the one thing.
Yeah, it's a great development, and the Fish brothers have done great work there, and excited to see how it continues to grow. Fat Village is going up in just north of where we are right now in Flagler Village, and there'll be artist studios and art spaces there. Mass District is facing a lot of development pressures, and it'll be interesting to see how arts and culture is preserved in the face of those developments. And I think that's where that kind of ties back into where I'm starting to put my focus is how do you preserve these things in the face of development pressures, and how do we work with developers to ensure that creative spaces and art spaces are still thought of and cared for and accounted for in spite of the development. We know the development is coming. We know things are changing, and we can't stand in the way of it. But what we can do is we can teach people how to preserve that, and while things develop around us, right? And we also have to stop thinking about the arts as mitigation, right? Because oftentimes the arts are thought of, or artists just naturally. I mean, look at Wynwood. Artists, came in and they created a really cool place that invited investment, and now the arts are there, but it's very commercial. And many, if not all, of the artists that started there are now pushed out, right? Or it's great to put artist studios in vacant places, but what happens when those places aren't vacant anymore? What does it do to the artists that are there, right? So we have to move beyond art as mitigation, art as a Band-Aid, and really think about how we what we value about arts and culture, and what does that mean, and then how do we make sure that whether it's from developments to land use to any aspect that we're preserving those cultural elements and not just using it as a Band-Aid.
Well, we talked a lot about a lot of things, and that's why I really, really wanted to have you on the podcast. You see the art movement and then the art in general, and with a different perspective. Of course, more into the business aspect of it, and then the growth of it for the community, for the town, for the city. So it's something really different. And I'm hoping a lot of people are going to be listening to this podcast, because what you are sharing, it's very crucial for some artists. And they're always looking for different ways of growing their own business, evolving in the art, and they might be down in Miami, they might be up in Palm Beach. So they're all looking for ways of expanding their horizon. And we are very, very fortunate here in South Florida that we have some big sports events like the Formula One. Now they really, really embrace this. So this is something also very impactful. And now we're also talking about millions of dollars. So this is great for the impact of the community. But here in Broward, there's much more to do.
there's a lot to do, and I always say, to people, we didn't get to where we are overnight, and I'm all about the long game. I'm about looking 30 years, 40 years into the future and saying, what can we do now? Going back to that garden analogy, how can we make sure that the soil we have now is going to bear fruit and grow 30 years from now? And so what do we need to do to care for it? What environment do we need to create? What strategies do we need to put in place? What things do we need to think about? Because that's what I want. I want, whether I'm here or not, I want everything that we do, that I do, that my division does, that this community does now to still be around in 30 years.
Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to show up for work every day and put our best foot forward and see what's in front of us. Yeah. And actually even see what's behind. Yeah. What's just like really focusing on keeping the horizon very clear. Yep. Right now things are a little bit different, but
there's a lot of headwinds. But
there's a lot of headwinds. Yes.
But we'll be all right, I think.
Yeah, we'll be all right. Before we know it, it'll be over.
It just depends on what that means.
Yeah, it depends on what that means. Yeah, well, that's another entire podcast.
Exactly. That'll be part 2.
Yeah, will be part 2. So, Phil, thank you so much for this few minutes.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm really hoping maybe some people to reach out to you.
Sure.
Some of the people who are listening, they can definitely go to the broward.org website and reach out to you. They can also reach out to me.
We also have artscalendar.com,
yes,
which is a great resource just to kind of see a lot of great things that are happening in Broward for the arts. It's a free service that we offer, and actually anyone that wants to put a cultural event on there, it's free for them as well. And we have thousands of events, and we get tens of thousands of people monthly that visit that website to look at what's happening in the arts. So check out artscalendar.com in addition to broward.org/arts.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you so much for loving this community, because you're the true guy. I mean, we met a few times, and you've always been very engaging, very smiling, very open to this community.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful community, and I'm happy to be part of it. So.
It is a fun community, and being an artist yourself, a musician, of course, you have to love other musicians, other artists. Yep. And whatever they want to share, whatever they have to offer, and everybody has something different. Yeah. So, Phil, thank you so very much again. Folks, we'll see you next week with another episode of Write Your Narrative.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Have a great day. Folks, we'll see you next week. Thank you again. Bye-bye now.